Got it. When, the hikes are up and people are renewing their mortgages, last year, maybe earlier this year, are you seeing that? Are you seeing how many people weren't able to renew their mortgage? I know that that was a horror story for a couple months as well, right?
It was really bad because you got to see a lot of people and how the effect of that variable from the negative perspective, how it impacted people. Because when your mortgage payment goes up, you're going to make that payment because you got to keep your roof over your head. But if you don't have the money to make that payment, what do? You draw from your line of credit. You draw from your credit card. You have to go get a second and third job, and now you're just exhausted. And I had people coming to me that were coming up on renewal trying to figure out what their situations could look like now that they've met this point where they can finally get some relief. But in that moment, they're like, dang, I have 40 grand of line of credit debt now. I never had that before. But that's what you had to use to kind of keep up with your payments.
Stay afloat.
So exactly, and you saw people that really just ended up drowning in other debts just to keep up with their mortgage, which now they're like, well, now I gotta refinance to wrap all those debts into my mortgage now, and now I have a larger mortgage than I had before.
It's crazy.
And that's why you gotta make sure that you can really live within and below your means so that you don't end up in these situations to begin with. But it all starts with the basic principles of money management.
Yeah. So at that, with all this data, is it still wise to rent? I mean, to
buy?
Purchase, to buy?
Well, I think whenever you're looking to buy a house,
I know there's pros and cons to both.
100%. And if you're somebody who, let's say you're somebody who's like, you know what, I don't have my bearings on my finances, I can't adjust if something was to kind of hit the fan.
Right.
Then maybe there are situations where I tell people you should probably rent. And
put your money somewhere else, maybe.
There's no exactly, or maybe you buy something and rent it out to somebody else. Make them handle the responsibility of it and have them pay down your mortgage.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that there's always alternatives. I'm very you're never gonna find a scenario where I'm like, real estate doesn't work. Period.
No, of course
for you.
not.
You know what I
Of course
mean?
not.
There's gonna be something that you can do to make it fit for your lifestyle or your preference.
Yeah.
But if you're somebody who isn't financially savvy, real estate can definitely eat you up and spit you out.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Doing, actually getting a property, or I was talking to a colleague the other day, where we're talking about, is it wise to rent and purchase somewhere and rent that out, right? You mentioned that just now. What's the difference when you're trying to get a mortgage and it's not your primary residence?
Good question.
I want to move back to mom's
Yeah.
and save the money and purchase something and not live there because I don't have to.
Right.
Right.
And I mean, I'm very candid. I'm very transparent because I know what I can and can't do.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'll tell you about my own instance as well. So, when I bought my first property, I stayed at home with my mom because I wanted to have that rental income, extra stream of income to help me save up for the next property, because I always knew I wanted to be able to, build wealth through real estate. If you're somebody who has that intention as well, if the property is in a vicinity, like let's say you're living in Brampton and you're looking to buy a property in Hamilton, 45 minutes, an hour out, you could say plausibly you're moving into the property, and that might be the difference between you being able to buy it for 10% down payment and 20% down payment. Because remember, if you're buying a rental property that you're claiming as a rental property upon purchase, you need 20% down payment.
It's an investment at that point, right?
Exactly.
So it's an investment property.
And if it's going to be an investment from the lender's perspective, you need at least 20% down payment.
Right.
But if you're somebody who is adamant on putting down less because either you don't have more money or you just don't want to spend more money, you need to make sure that you're buying a property in a reasonable vicinity so you could say you're moving in, or be fully remote so you could say that I'm moving in. Because if you cannot say that you're moving in, you need 20% down payment.
Right.
So in a situation where somebody wants to stay at home or even continue to rent, if you don't want to pay 20% down payment, which if you're okay paying 20% down payment, then it doesn't matter. But if you're like, I have 15% nothing more, or have 10% nothing more, then you need to either be remote or it needs to be in a radius from wherever you go to work to be able to plausibly say that you're moving into the property.
What if you move in there for a year and then you exit after that year? Does it matter?
No, it doesn't.
Are they in your business?
And they're not in your business like that. Listen, all banks care about is, are you paying that mortgage?
My point exactly.
Yeah.
These are, I know the answers, but I need to get it from the professional.
You need to get it out. Yeah, like as long as that check clears and that payment is in the bank's hand every month,
they're not knocking on your door.
They're not knocking on your door. Who you need to be careful about is the government. Yeah, they got to make. They're the ones that's really going to double check and make sure. Like, okay, did you skip out on your land? Did you get a land transfer tax rebate that you weren't supposed to get?
Right.
Did you bend the rules to make things work for you in your favor? That's what you need to be more mindful of.
Yeah, they will knock. They will send a letter.
They'll play detective, right? Like if you're saying you moved in somewhere but your address didn't change, or
nothing was updated, driver's license.
Exactly.
Nothing.
Or you got somebody else living at your place who has your address and every bill is in their name and The government also does their taxes.
Be smart.
You know what I mean? Like, you gotta
Play the game a little bit.
play the game. If you're gonna play the
smart.
game, play it properly.
Yeah. 30, 25, what's better? Obviously, you know, I would go with a longer, stretched out mortgage. But what's the pros and cons to that, right?
Great question.
I know they introduced this a few years ago, where you know it was usually 25, correct?
Yeah. So this past December, they introduced new rules for first-time homebuyers to get access to 30-year amortizations with less than 20% down payment, which before you had access to 30-year amortizations if you had 20% down payment. Now you can have it with or without, which is great. And in my opinion, I like this change because I always like going with the longer amortization because it shrinks your monthly payment, makes things more affordable. We're here talking about how expensive it is, period, right now. If you can cut costs somewhere, it's great. And then the thing is, I get it. People don't necessarily like the idea of being tied to a debt for 5 years longer. Well, what you can do and what almost every lender has as an option as well are prepayment privileges, which now gives you the opportunity to make extra payments to that mortgage, and that excess that you pay goes straight to the principal. So what this is a strategy I gave to my client literally like 2 weeks ago, because they bought the house in December. They don't close until I think a week or two from now. So they've had some time to kind of mull over options, and new things have come into place since they bought the house. So he had a 25-year amortization originally. Now that he can get 30 years.
Oh, you can go back?
I can change it, yeah. Nothing is final until you close on your mortgage.
Okay.
So everything is subject. If you want to change from fixed to variable, he could do it before closing.
Yeah.
So long he still qualifies. But nonetheless, he now has this 30-year option on the table that he can now pivot to.
Yeah.
And we're making that pivot for him because of these two reasons. It now gives him a monthly payment that is $300 cheaper. And yes, that does add 5 years longer on his amortization schedule if he follows his payment schedule.